Good morning and welcome to the Medtech Intelligence webinar, Managing Global Regulatory Strategy and Compliance, Assessing Status, Gaps, and Needs. We'll be exploring recent research findings and their relevance within your regulatory affairs. I'm Rich West, the Editorial Director and Publisher of Medtech Intelligence, and I'll be your moderator for today's discussion. This webinar and the research supporting our discussion was underwritten by Intelligence. Intelligence provides the global life sciences industry with consulting services and solutions to support regulatory affairs, operations, and strategy. Now let me introduce today's panelists. Dr. Pratibha Mishra is the Senior Manager and Principal SME Medical Devices Services at Intelligence. Aaron Cosgrove, VP of Business Development, Medical Devices at Intelligence. Ibram Taria, PhD, Technical Director, Medical Devices at SGS North America, and Greg Jacobson, Sales Director, Medical Devices, SGS North America. SGS is a participant in this webinar for comment purposes only on information that is in the public domain. As a notified body, SGS cannot endorse any consulting firm, and SGS's participation in this webinar should not be construed as such. Let's set the stage now for today's discussion. So, Medtech Intelligence developed research to gauge the current status of the medical device industry's regulatory affairs and compliance management. The survey explored challenges and opportunities, technology adoption, and investment directives. An executive summary of the survey is currently available at medtechintelligence.com. Through a download link that will also be provided by email and at the end of this program. Also, watch for a comprehensive report with additional insights and information within the next 2 weeks. So let's get started. The survey was done across Medtech Intelligence readership, a database of more than 50,000, including 17,000 MTI newsletter subscribers. Respondents include a variety of medical device professionals, about 2/3 of which are currently working within the RA/QA roles within their organizations, and 66% have supervisory positions with roughly 1/3 as individual contributors. Nearly 80% of our respondents work for OEM medical device makers, contract manufacturers of finished devices, and device components and subassembly suppliers. Nearly 40% of the respondent companies have 5 or fewer devices currently in the market, and many have products spanning multiple device classes. So what are the key findings? Today we'll primarily focus on 4 key insight areas: top regulatory challenges for medical device manufacturers, MDR maintenance, including 2024 regulatory spending areas of investment and challenges, technology adoption and use, primarily AI, and current internal, external resourcing demands and the needs, growth, and benefits of regulatory outsourcing expertise. The most common themes we heard throughout the survey is strained resources. And when asked about 2024 priorities, only 21% of our readership felt that they have the resource needs to meet all of the 2024 priorities. Aaron, is this nearly 80% of the market feeling under-resourced really prevalent in the market today and among your clients?
I think it is, based on the conversations I have with clients, the amount of work that needs to be done and the resources that are there to do it. Certainly I think part of what we'll want to cover on the webinar today is what are the ways to bridge that gap? Because I hear over and over again, there is a gap between the work that needs to get done and the resources that are there to do it, and that gap's not getting smaller. So some of what we'll cover on the webinar today is what are the ways to bridge that gap? Where can you leverage AI? Where can you use technology to make the team more efficient? Where does it make sense to outsource as an option to bridge that gap? So I think there's going to be some really good information as we get into the details here, Rich.
So, Pratibha, most of our respondents rank their organization's compliance skill sets as very high, yet only 6% said their regulatory intelligence and compliance monitoring capabilities were comprehensive with robust processes, dedicated staff, and automation. And as this chart here shows, nearly half of our readers stated time and bandwidth was either the number one or two challenge for the regulatory teams. Costs are also noted as a top challenge, resources and budget constraints. So does this match what you're hearing in the marketplace and what you're seeing contributing to this?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's not surprising to see these responses from the regulatory readership of MTI. The challenges that we're hearing definitely relates to the time available and the bandwidth from all the customers that we interact with. There is just more that needs to be done now. In terms of documentation, in terms of maintaining compliance of devices that are already on the market. And there's a lot of changes in the regulatory world. MDR is the buzzword, as we know, but there have been changes in other markets as well, in China with their regulations. In the last 5 or 6 years, there have been changes in very recently. The Saudi Arabian regulations have been, coming up on our radar a lot. So a lot of big and small markets have seen changes in the regulations that apply to these devices, and the speed with which the manufacturers have to comply with them has also accelerated. It could be because of either starting late or because there were just more complications to deal with, and initially their staffing or expertise was maybe a few individuals, a few roles that were dealing with all of this. And now with this accelerated requirements, it's there are gaps showing up in the people as well as processes within these organizations.
Greg, as a notified body, are you hearing and seeing the same bandwidth issues?
Yes, Rich, for the last couple of years at the notified body, we've been talking to our MDD customers and what are their plans for moving ahead, if at all. What we've discovered is that these can be divided into different buckets. So, for example, our small and medium enterprise companies with low-risk devices, the time and the bandwidth, it just doesn't work for them anymore. The revenue that they have in Europe to support MDR isn't there, and so many have decided to exit the market. The high-risk devices, on the other hand, it's different. We found that they want to stay in the market. Their regulatory teams are better staffed, better capitalized. They do use consultants. They have found the time. They have recognized the need to remain on the market because the European Union market is so large they can't turn away from it. As well, they've had clinical data previously. They didn't use predicate data. They have their own results. They're better prepared for it. So what we're finding from the small and medium companies, high-risk devices will seem to be remaining on the market. And the time and bandwidth is they're just seem better suited for it.
Okay. Thanks, Greg. On a related topic, MDR maintenance, this has been a leading industry focal point with shifting timelines, significant budget impact, and compliance concerns for a while. We asked our audience about MDR maintenance spending compared to a year ago, and 87% reported budgets continuing, as the same or increasing for this year versus last year. And nearly half of those said that they're spending more money than last year. Aaron, do you see these increasing budgets being sustained? How are these programs managing the budgeting challenge?
Yeah, I hear it as a constant challenge from clients. One thing that's happened, is that in many cases, manufacturers used to plan to spend more money on U.S. regulatory, and Europe was a smaller portion of the budget. And now for a lot of manufacturers with the MDR requirements, and upcoming IVDR, that's flipped. They're spending more money to bring products and keep products on the European market. And that can be a real challenge because the revenue's not always there in proportion to the investment. So we hear clients looking at it and saying, hey, I was expecting that once I got through the spike of work, once I got my products with their MDR certs, that this was going to come down and the amount of effort I would need was going to drop. And that's just not what's happening. What we're seeing is that the MDR maintenance work is still a high level of investment to keep those products on the European market. And, if a manufacturer has unlimited budgets, unlimited resources, absolutely you can just keep going, keep doing all of the MDR work. The reality for most manufacturers is you're looking very carefully at budgets, you're looking at resources, and you're saying, how do we make this happen? How do we, keep products on the market, know that they're safe, and at the same time continue to invest in bringing our new products out there and being able to, bring those innovations to market to help patients to grow revenue. And I think what we're seeing is, clients are looking at it, what can I do with technology? What can I do to make my teams more efficient leveraging technology? Where do I strategically look to outsource? Where do I add resources to my team and justify that investment? And I see it working differently for every client because it's going to depend on the business. It's going to depend on what's happening, what are the priorities. But we do see a lot of clients choosing to keep the focus internally on the very strategic areas, the new product development, the new product submissions, and look at options to outsource some of the more routine work. And MDR maintenance is a good example of that. That lets clients keep that deep internal expertise where it adds the most value, and then free up some of their time and internal resources by outsourcing some of the more routine work.
There are many areas included in NDR maintenance. Our survey indicated, many of these areas of individual need, like 34% citing the need for support with technical documentation and dossier preparation. Maybe you can, better define MDR maintenance and what we mean by that and why it's been such a major focus.
Yeah, what I hear from clients when they're talking about MDR maintenance from the manufacturer perspective, it's really the ongoing work. So this is what happens post initial MDR certification. What's required now for the ongoing CER updates? What's required for the post-market surveillance reports? What type of data needs to be gathered? What type of updates need to be submitted to notified body? And what I hear from clients, I would say this survey data completely aligns. If you look at the ongoing maintenance work that's needed to keep updating the technical documentation to make sure that everything's compliant with MDR. Maybe when the transition first happened, a lot of us might have been a little unrealistic about what this ongoing effort was going to look like. Initially, I certainly thought we were going to see a spike, we were going to see it come back down, it was going to look a lot more like MDD with a few extra requirements. And that's just not the reality. The reality is there's a lot of ongoing work that's required. And, I think you saw it in the earlier data, companies are stretched thin, there's not a lot of there's just not a lot of resources there to make all the work happen, and there's a lot of competing priorities. There's new products, there's the medical affairs work, there's the regulatory strategy to ensure that the business is continuing to growing, and I think that's why we're seeing more interest in outsourcing some of the MDR maintenance work because it helps balance that out. If you've got MDR maintenance work where you've got products that maybe only need to be updated every other year, now you've got a spike here, you've got a dip, and companies have to make the decision, does it make sense to resource the team for those spikes, or do you try to balance that workload out and look at partnering and outsourcing and look at what you can leverage with technology as ways to make sure that that work gets done and that you can continue to make those really strategic investments where they're most impactful for your business?
Evam, how can companies prepare early on for MDR maintenance, preparing for working with notified bodies, testing processes, product validations, et cetera?
Thank you, Rich. So from our vintage point as a notified body, we across the industry, so we deal with, from low to very high risk devices. There's no doubt about it. The MDR maintenance has placed increased level of burden on manufacturers and disproportionately so on small to medium-sized manufacturers. However, Rich, the reality is that the requirements have always been there, even in the MDD. The difference is that they were not as explicit. Consequently, I think manufacturers have sometimes underestimated what was really required. I'll give you an instance. When MedDev 2.7.1 Rev 4 was published in 2016, there was a massive hue and cry saying, my goodness, these requirements take us beyond the MDD. But there was a reason the European Commission put out that document. It was to help nudge manufacturers in their preferred direction. The MDR was around the corner. So what you're finding is that manufacturers who didn't heed that warning or work to that document, guidance document, frankly, are struggling today. So there's no doubt about it that MDR requires more information, more explicit information. Another example I'll give you will be post-market surveillance. In the MDD, it was only covered in a one line. Under the MDR, guess what? There's a whole new annex, Annex 3, that deals with documentation for post-market surveillance. And then there are articles, sections in the regulation that really go deep. So it's a matter of manufacturers better understanding these more explicit requirements and then generating data to demonstrate compliance. The reason I say that is manufacturers oftentimes, if they're not fully aware, will provide information that is rather light, and then everybody will push back. They then get frustrated. It needn't be like that. It's more a matter of making sure we're all on the same page, provide information to support whatever claims you wish to make about your device, and hopefully the notified body will say yes.
So from what I'm hearing from both you, Evam, and Aaron, is that this more explicit requirement and more supporting data, this leads to more significant financial impact for many along the journey. So, Pratibha, how are you seeing these device makers managing through these changes, from a financial impact as well as just in resources?
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge for them. So if we speak specifically about MDR, there's, like Erin mentioned, there was a surge to, get the initial certifications done, and then there should be a drop in the amount of effort needed for maintenance activities, which, as an SME, that was incorrect assumption, because the requirements are very clear. It's very evident, like Ibim said, if you have entire sections dedicated to post-market surveillance, there are steps that you would have to take to maintain compliance throughout the life cycle of the device. So now the decision makers are wondering why there is suddenly a need for large armies of people in regulatory departments, clinical departments, to address this requirement. We recently have had a conversation with a customer, fairly large size customer, that their regulatory team mentioned that the initial budget that we were assigned for MDR compliance is almost consumed, but the work just doesn't seem to go down. We still have that much, or at least 70-80% of the original effort is still required. It's also because the processes cannot be done in silos anymore. Everything needs to feed into each other. It's connected to each other for good reason. The idea is to have certain level of consistency and have the manufacturers address safety or performance concerns that are coming up from the device. It may seem improbable, but we are still seeing situations where risks identified from clinical evaluation are not addressed in the risk management process. So the goal of the regulation is to address that gap. And now to address that gap, the business is asking for new roles, new resources to catch up and to maintain the kind of documentation that is required, which can be challenging for some manufacturers. Greg, what do you think about this?
Thank you, Pratibha. It seems the small, medium companies' financials are turned upside down by this, particularly lower risk devices. Those who took it seriously, especially on high-risk products following 2.7 Rev 4, they now have a competitive advantage in the market. It truly opens up the market for early adopters. Unfortunately, we've seen other companies who've not survived this. Companies have gone out because financial load and not being prepared.
Yeah, so I can certainly see how this creates a so-called perfect storm. Companies wanting to move ahead to the next products, yet they face these mountains. Trying to stay on top of requirements. So, Aaron, what are some of the strategies you're seeing companies take for MDR maintenance?
Yeah, Rich, I agree. I hear a lot that it's a challenging situation. I think that's why it's not surprising to see the numbers you showed where almost 90% are planning to spend the same or more as last year. I think it's coming down to there's a specific amount of work that needs to be done. That's not going to change. The question is, how do you resource that work? And I see clients looking at very strategically making a decision. Okay, what's my, am I making this or am I buying it? What's my in-source, outsource mix here? And, they're looking at how much can I increase the efficiency with technology? What can I leverage to be able to do more with the same resources, with less resources, with maybe a small increase in resources? And then they're also looking, where does it strategically make sense to outsource? Because in a lot of cases, the budget's just not there. Pratibha talked about the number of people that are needed to do the work. And for a lot of manufacturers, the dollars just aren't there to bring on that number of full-time staff. So now they're looking to say, okay, where can I strategically outsource some of this work? Where does it make sense for me to really focus my key resources? What are the top priorities for the company, and where do I need that deep expertise? So that's what I see a lot of clients, as they're working through how do you solve this big challenge around the level of work versus the number of resources that you have.
Yeah, those are great points, Sarah, and I think this is where technology can help, right? So if we're looking at new technologies, what AI, et cetera, can provide, some of these financial and resource burdens, do have some opportunity for some level of mitigation through technology. So our survey looked at that, and there's no escape from the buzz around technology, especially around AI use. This survey certainly supports this, and the continued maturity curve that show that there's use continuing to grow, but there's some trepidation for employing artificial intelligence within regulatory strategies at the same time. As this graph shows, there's still quite a range of adoption, including 26% that are currently using AI in some way, another 20%, planning, and still nearly half, 45%, citing that they just don't have enough information or they're waiting for additional guidance to implement. To make this all real, we looked at some of the use cases today, plus, where there are identified needs that AI may provide that assistance. The current top use cases include, within the device itself, automated report generation, submission planning, and tracking. When citing top identified needs cases, where AI can actually help, that's not being employed is, 55% of the survey takers again say automated report generation. And half of those readers added risk mitigation and post-market surveillance within their identified AI use cases. Pratibha, how do you see these cases compare with what your team is seeing among the device makers you're working with?
Well, it's very similar to what we see here. Of course, AI is not just in our industry, just in general. It's a very interesting and challenging field, and it's come up very with a lot of speed, and is expected to be incorporated in a lot of processes. Even in medical devices, there are regulations coming up to to address AI use in medical devices. So there is definitely potential for it to address a lot of the challenges that we have, that the manual processes or that the our current approach cannot solve, or is too complicated for us to solve. So we are hearing about companies looking for technology platforms, as well as blending it with expertise to bring it into their processes and update their workflows. And AI does have potential to do that in the life cycle maintenance for medical device documentation, and also for improving just the quality of what is done. There are in the process of, if I take clinical evaluation as an example, which is something that we are working on almost every day, there are a lot of aspects to the process which is very mechanical, which is very data centric, and the manual efforts and spreadsheets are just not able to manage the requirements of access, of retrieval, of sifting through large quantities of data that is required for creating this documentation. And incorporation of technology, incorporation of AI in the process is definitely making the methodologies more robust and more consistent. I've been part of so many webinars and conferences from notified body speakers who have expressed their frustration with how the review process keeps getting hampered by very easily solvable situations, such as the documentation not being consistent, or not being provided in the right order, or the links not working, and that definitely pushes back the the review process, aside from the frustration that it may cause the reviewers. But Ibram, I think you're the right person to provide a perspective on this particular topic.
Yes, thanks, Pratibha. There's no doubt about it. I agree with the use cases comments you've made. It makes sense moving to a more systematic way of gathering information, analyzing the information, distilling therefrom, and using that information, if you're smart, in multiple applications. You're absolutely right. One of the frustrations most notified bodies go through is to do with documentation. So you go on site, the links work because you're working within the manufacturer's system. But they send you this information, they've not checked, you're trying to access data, links don't work. There's back and forth. It creates a lot of aggravation. it wastes time. Nobody wants to waste time. We all want to work in an efficient manner. But I think we're getting to a point now where we need to go beyond what we used to do. For me, the analogy is similar to going from paper copy submissions to sending submissions on flash drives and CD-ROMs. And now we use SharePoints and things work much better. I think we're at the next phase of that technological evolution whereby, given the plethora of information the manufacturer has to generate and the notified body has to review, both as part of QMS and product review, those two strands have to come together for that certification decision to be made. I will humbly submit that we need help, and technology is probably the way forward, in my mind. A great example that's been given before is PMS. Post-market surveillance is split into reactive and proactive. Just gathering complaints and vigilance won't cut it. For high-risk devices, you've got to do post-market clinical follow-up. How are you going to manage all this information? Mm-hmm. And Pratima mentioned it earlier. These things are all linked back to your risk management. So it's pretty clear that using the old approach of just a bunch of spreadsheets wouldn't really cut it. And let's not forget, what we do is part of the law. What if there was a situation where we ended up in a court of law, where the judge doesn't care who said what? The judge wants to see the objective evidence. You may have forgotten that spreadsheet that was used 10 years ago. But if you've got a smart technology, it will be pretty easy to pull up the data and present your evidence. So that's my take from a notified body perspective.
Thanks, Hibam. To use your own phrasing, there's no doubt about it. It will continue to provide significant impact on regulatory processes, as we know. Pratima, Aaron, maybe you can give us other specific examples of how and where AI can continue to benefit or will in the future benefit compliance management and overall regulatory strategies.
Sure, I can take that first. There's definitely real life use cases where we are already implementing it for creation of regulatory documentation, like clinical evaluation reports, like PSURs. We are able to automatically extract data from literature, summarize data, look for information that is relevant to the particular device or that particular document. Utilize AI Copilot chat for accessing specific information in large documents or in publications, and going through source documents, significantly cutting down the time that we used to spend on a technical file of thousands of pages and so much information in there, which we are able to more efficiently utilize now to create an initial version of a document which can then be further populated or can be reviewed. And we spoke about MDR maintenance before, and this is, in my opinion, quite critical going forward, because we will have to update and maintain documents with new information as and when that is identified, and it will help to have a supporting tool that can help us do that, help us identify that information, help us update that document. We're already seeing a lot of impact on improvement in efficiency on working on these documents, ease of locating information from, like I mentioned, from large source data. As an SME, one thing that is very important and impressive for me is the type of consistency, the type of quality that we are able to maintain in the outputs once the requirements are set. This has significantly minimized the errors that we used to encounter, and which subsequently the notified bodies would have to encounter in something as simple as literature report outputs. And obviously all of this then leads to cost and time savings because of automating a lot of the processes involved. Erin, maybe you can add some points from your perspective as well.
Yeah, I think when the AI hype really first started, we would get questions saying, okay, great. So can technology just, can AI write my CERs? And now I think everyone's looking at the reality and realizing a lot of things that you can do with generative AI, things like CERs where you need the deep subject matter expertise, where there's a lot of interpretation, where there's an art to them. You really need that human ability to put all of the pieces together. Pratibha talked earlier about how interlinked a document like the CER is. And so you certainly still want that written by an expert. At the same time, there's a lot that clients are seeing in terms of the value to the business from AI, from technology. And I see manufacturers being very strategic in terms of where they're implementing it. A lot of the focus is around where can this add value to my team? How can I take this technology and make my team more efficient in what they do? How can I take some of the more mundane work or the more tactical work off of their plate, let technology take on some of that, and let my team really focus on where I need their brains, I need their expertise to be able to write a very complex document for the notified body. And I think that's really where we're seeing a lot of manufacturers focus is, where's the return on investment here? Where can I see the benefits of putting that investment into AI or technology?
Yeah, and actually, if I can go back to the response that we saw from the survey, in terms of what is identified as future need, the 55% of respondents are saying automatic report generation, which we are already doing using AI. Then there's aspects of analyzing large quantities of data from post-market surveillance, which Ibim also mentioned that there are very specific requirements to do that, and linking it to your risk management process. The end goal is to have a technology that integrates AI to an extent that it can provide us the specific guidances that needs to be followed from a regulatory perspective. And I know that we are speaking a lot about MDR here, but there's so many other regulations all across the world, different markets where they have specific requirements that you have to meet as a manufacturer. So helping technology do that for you and reducing the burden on specific subject matter experts because they will have a tool to assist them, and generating a document directly through the tool, assisting the authors of the document in creating effective strategies in incorporating AI or technology from the very beginning of the process will definitely reduce the bottleneck of bandwidth that we're talking about. And also going back to what Ibim said, having a single source of truth for all information that can be retrieved maybe 5 years, 10 years from now when that is required, and not having to go back and look for spreadsheets or documents which there may not be any trace of. It's just a fact that automation can help us go beyond managing the complex data than what we are doing manually right now, and that has to be also a change in the mindset. Speaking as somebody who is very resistant to new technology, it definitely is a mindset change that is required for understanding that this is just something that has to be done. I mentioned risk management, but even maybe you can also, from your perspective, add how important it is and how right now there's scope for improvement in that aspect.
Thank you, Pratibha. So risk management, it's interesting in the sense that if you think about it carefully, the whole of the MDR is really a risk management document. Believe it or not, risk management is mentioned at least 250 times. So it's not just doing an FME and think you've done risk management. No, it's all linking it to that clinical evaluation you've done, to your PMS, be it reactive and proactive, then going back to your original data, updating your IFU if necessary, your product level, sometimes the outcome from a good risk management could also trigger the next iteration of your device. So it's got to be pretty comprehensive. And if you don't have a robust and sophisticated way of gathering and maintaining all this data that will serve as input for periodically updating your risk management, you're going to be in trouble. There's no doubt about it. I think we need something other than spreadsheets to manage this sort of information. And keep in mind, it's not just doing it one time. You do it the first time to achieve that threshold of attaining CE mark. Then the party starts. You now got to maintain it. Also keep in mind, for implantable devices, you're talking about retaining information for at least 15 years after the last production. So I think it lays bare the challenges we all have to face and figure out how best to handle this moving forward.
The opportunities abound, regardless of your thoughts or fears relative to AI and the hype. Tying this back to the earlier survey data, building this knowledge base and improving these skill sets will take time, investment, resources, all of which were shown through the survey results. Our survey asked readers about current resource planning with interesting views on how outsourcing can help bridge those gaps in bandwidth, regulatory intelligence, and efficient compliance management. So it's pretty obvious the industry has some strong views on outsourcing. We learned from the survey that 82% either use or currently plan to use outsourced services, and we explored where these outsourced services are currently working or where they can provide additional benefit to be employed. The graph here shows a variety of use cases and shows how companies are leveraging outsourcing, straight across all regulatory affairs with MDR, IVDR consulting and regulatory submission assistance, being the top current outsourcing needs, but other outsourcing services include post-market clinical follow-up, regulatory standards gaps analysis, UDI consulting, QMS, and quality documentation and document management, CER, consulting, et cetera, complaint management. Aaron, I got to believe these are consistent with what you're seeing in the market as well.
Yeah, Rich, absolutely. I think what I hear consistently from clients is, the first thing they're doing is they're looking at what's the amount of work that needs to be done, and MDR and IVDR are having a big impact on that volume of work. Then they're saying, okay, what can I get done with my existing team? What's my budget look like to bring on additional resources? What can I get, what kind of increased efficiencies can I get with a technology investment? And then where does it make sense for me to outsource? And then where they are looking to outsource, the next question they're asking is, who am I going to outsource to? Who do I partner with? Because they want to make sure they're bringing in a solid vendor that's going to be able to bring expertise, a vendor that's done it before and can really work with them as a partner. Bring the expertise, maybe bring the technology, but also be able to support them as they're looking to improve their own processes with the internal team as well. So I think you're seeing it very selective, very strategic, where it makes sense for the manufacturer.
Yeah, so if we look at it that way and say, let's juxtapose a couple of areas of the survey, the MDR, IVDR timelines, and outsourcing as example. We previously saw that 80% of the readers felt they do not have the resources to meet the IVDR, MDR compliance needs. Here we see related tasks as top areas where outsourcing will provide benefit, specifically pre-market work, such as technical documentation, cost-effective methods for supporting MDR maintenance. Pratibha, do you have thoughts on this particular part of the survey?
Yeah, it's quite interesting to me because we have spoken about bandwidth and resourcing challenges, but there's also a struggle to find the right experts and try and manage all of this within their budget. I think 1/3 of the respondents are claiming that this is one of the top 3 skills that they need to develop within their teams, and it has to be done at an accelerated speed as well within the next 1 to 2 years. So it's very clear that there is a gap here. We hear about even notified bodies struggling with having enough experts to deal with the influx of certification requests that are coming in or review requests that are coming in. That is definitely the case with manufacturers as well. It's also because it's what we discussed earlier in this survey, that it's not just about creating a documentation and being done with it. There is a whole process involved. There's a workflow. There's a requirement for different departments to interact with each other, and everything to be feeding into each other, which obviously requires specific, highly skilled individuals to be part of the team. So it is definitely an investment to onboard a partner, which organizations do find challenging, but it's an investment that is necessary at this point, especially for companies that are manufacturing class 1 and 2 low to moderate risk devices, because as Greg mentioned, high-risk device manufacturers already recognize that this is unavoidable. And for manufacturers that are catching up, it's necessary that they do this to keep up with the compliance requirements.
Hey, what about preconceptions of outsourcing? Our study looked at some of that, and almost 50% of our survey respondents said they had preconceived notions that the cost of outsourcing was prohibitive. It was by far the leading factor for outsourcing, decision making. And 16% of those were also concerned about outsourcing associates maybe lacking specific knowledge of their products or fully understanding their business mindsets and strategies. Aaron, from a commercial perspective, how do these preconceived notions on cost why are they prohibitive, and how can we avoid that?
Yeah, Rich, I absolutely hear that from clients. I think everyone's looking at budgets and what's the best way to get things done. Certainly if a manufacturer has the staff and the resources to do it, then outsourcing may not make sense. If you can do it internally and you've got the team, look at technology, look at ways to make that team more efficient. Where we see a lot of clients looking to outsource, looking to bring on a partner, is when they don't have those internal resources and they're making a decision. Hey, where's the best use of my budget? If I've got this spike of work one year, less work the next year, does it make sense to staff for the spikes, or do I staff for the lower point and bring on outside help to get the spikes done? And I think the other piece that we're seeing regulatory leaders really think through is, when you look at the resources and look at the teams, if you're trying to do everything and you don't have the bandwidth, we've seen the MDR work's not going away, the IVDR work is just ramping up. If you're trying to do everything with the same amount of resources, then it's really, really hard to do everything well. And by definition, it means you're putting time, you're putting effort into making sure that your products are staying on the market, making sure that your products are demonstrated to be safe. And that's the routine maintenance work. And that means that at the same time, team's not spending as much time, as much focus on bringing those innovative new products to market, on getting those new submissions done, on being able to spend time on regulatory intelligence, thinking through the regulatory strategy. And there's a cost to that. I think if you look at MDR and IVDR, that's a great example of where maybe a lot of us underestimated what that workload was going to look like. And so now, as we're in kind of this reality check, it's looking at it and saying, okay, what's the really strategic work that I need my dedicated, highly knowledgeable team on? What's the more routine work that may make more sense to outsource. And MDR maintenance is the one that's coming up from a lot of manufacturers as a good area to where they've either started to do it or where they're exploring doing it. And I think you made a good point earlier around the partner and what to look for there, because certainly, having the right partner, having a trusted partner that's bringing that expertise can really help manufacturers be more proactive, stay in front of these requirements, share what is being learned across different notified bodies, across different products, and bring it back to the manufacturer. Craig, what do you see from the notified body side? What are you hearing from clients there?
Erin, in our discussions with small and medium-sized clients and prospects, moving from MDD to MDR, the regulatory team on staff, previously certified MDD, was usually enough to cover it. But now with MDR, that team cannot always cover it, and we need to outsource for help. Because of that, we're hearing from companies that the math doesn't work anymore, especially if companies have a small percentage of revenue in Europe. Unfortunately, some of these companies have to exit the market because of the financials, especially if they have to add outsourced costs.
Yeah, we've had very similar conversations with clients, and I think that is the reality of the market. Is there's this ongoing MDR cost. I mean, I've heard clients say that they didn't fully understand what the ongoing investment was going to be, what the cost was going to be over the years to keep products on market once they had the initial MDR cert. And I think now that's part of the driver to say, hey, how can we get this done in a more cost-effective way? Certainly for manufacturers that want to keep their products, want to continue to sell in Europe, it's a smart investment, and it's figuring out where can you get the most value for the money that you're putting into that.
So companies with high-risk devices, they're going to remain on the market. They want to remain on the market. They need Europe to be part of their marketplace portfolio, so to speak. Often they don't have a choice even with the math. The notified bodies are seeing small companies with low-risk devices exiting due to the return on investment. Small, medium companies with high-risk devices or innovative devices in Europe are staying. Sometimes they have venture capital funding as well. Need to consider that and show return on investment.
So, Fatima and Aaron, can you walk us through what a device maker might be looking for in their evaluation of outsourcing partners and the options and the opportunities that are out there?
Yeah, sure. I can answer that first. The most important aspects to look for are their knowledge and experience. Do they have the requisite knowledge in the regulatory domain for the specific areas where you need assistance, whether it is MDR, whether it is UDI, whether it is creating regulatory strategy? Do they have experts from clinical background on their staff who can assist with clinical strategies, with post-market clinical follow-ups? That will be effective in providing you data that you need for maintaining safety and performance of your device. Whether that is in terms of the process that is required, or whether it is specific therapeutic area knowledge, or even the knowledge related to the medical device, your portfolio, the kind of medical conditions it's been used, and does their team have that knowledge? And is there a proven track record of success? If we talk about MDR, have they worked with devices where they managed to get the MDD to MDR transition done successfully? They managed to get the devices CE marked successfully. Is it an organization that invests in building its knowledge base? Do their team members attend conferences, attend webinars? Continuously build on that knowledge, which they can then share with you or with your team to consistently improve what is being done for regulatory compliance. And of course, another important aspect is confidentiality of documents. Is there evidence that they professionally handle your documents? Do they have security measures in place? if they're using a technology tool, is it a validated tool? All of this are, all of these are aspects that are very, very basic that you as a manufacturer should look into when you are partnering with a company.
Yeah, Pratibha, those are great points. And I think you said it, do they have the expertise? It's also, can they demonstrate that they've done it? You don't want to bring in a vendor who's going to be going through the learning curve for the first time when they're working with you. You want somebody that has proven that they can do it and do it well. Some of the things that you can look at as you're doing it is, what are the credentials and certifications that the vendor has? Are they ISO 9001 certified, which shows that they've got a quality management system in place? Can they demonstrate that they've got the certificates, as Pratibha said, that they can show how they're handling confidential documents, that there's a system in place there. I think the other piece is looking at, you're bringing in somebody as a partner. You're going to spend time training them. You're going to spend time bringing them up to speed. You want to make sure you've got the right vendor to do that with. And some of the things to look at are, is it a partner that's going to help your team get better? Are they going to be able to bring in training, bring in technology, bring in best practices that can help your organization become more efficient? You're paying for the vendor expertise, and so you want to make sure you're getting the most bang for your buck there when you look at what they're bringing in, both short-term for a specific project, but also long-term to help you take your team and your organization to the next level. Greg, what about from the notified body perspective? What do you see as the key points?
Let me take this first. Thank you, Erin. So I've seen consultants who have very limited experience try to enter the space and represent a range of services. They probably got away with it under the MDD. What you're going to find is that under the MDR, they will be struggling. The MDRs I earlier mentioned before is much more explicit. MDR requires specialization, and the onus has to be on the manufacturer to vet consultants and subcontractors they wish to bring on board. Now, I think that is just good practice. It makes good business sense. There's no doubt about it. For the small to medium-sized companies, they are very likely to subcontract or outsource some of these services just because of the specialization that is required. Pratibha gave us a whole list. So the thing is, if you use that former colleague or someone who's recently retired from the agency to help you out for everything, you find that it's not scalable. That person may have their own area of specialty, but maybe you need help in other areas. So the chances that you may need more than one consultant to help you out. That is the way small to medium-sized companies have to think about it. The big organizations do have a whole army of people, who will help them out across, the services that they require to bring their products to market. Right?
These are all great and valid points. At the end of the day, these processes and requirements are in place for the safety of the devices and ultimately for the patient health and safety. I agree that outsourcing with the right level of expertise combined with technology can help companies to be more compliant and more successful.
Thanks, everyone. Let's wrap this up because we're over time at this point. Basically what we learned today is keep the end game in mind. Keep your notified bodies, your submissions, the processes at the forefront. Consider mindset change. You can't have closed mind on what drives processes, efficiencies, and success. Technologies are here to help along the way. Technologies such as AI are here. They're going to continue to grow and enhance our opportunities. Expertise to assist your team from outside resources is, undoubtedly going to be somewhere that organizations are going to have to continue to go as the complexities just get even greater. And when you're looking for those outside resources, find your trusted partners by doing your research, doing your due diligence, and vetting those partners and their services, their capabilities, et cetera, very well. I'd like to ask all the speakers to open up their audio and video cameras now so we can answer some questions, and then we'll proceed. A couple of questions that I'll start with one that I looked at. Looking at the survey and talking about AI utilization. When we looked at the survey, only 6% of the survey takers talked about currently using AI for PMS use. But PMS is mentioned over and over again throughout the conversation today. We had another third that say they don't see or have any need for AI in PMS. Does this make sense to you, Pratibha?
At one point, I didn't see any need for having a smartphone, so I may not be the right person to ask this question. But I think that if you have a very low risk device where you have very limited complaints, a very limited amount of effort needed in post-market surveillance, it makes sense that you may not need to invest in technology that can help you manage all the processes and data. But I think there are very few products like that. Usually you will have a lot of processes established already for PMS. You will have, and like Ibi mentioned, there's a whole sets of documents that need to be prepared that were not done previously. You will need to make sure that what you're identifying from one product family is also applied to other product families. You'll have to look into similar device risks. There's a lot of requirements now that just if with the mindset of having to address all the risks that are there, and making your device safe and giving it a competitive advantage, you'll just have to incorporate what is the best process right now for evaluating all the data and maintaining consistency. And I think that that's something that is, like Abim has said repeatedly, it's something that's we cannot avoid anymore.
So is Erin still on with us, or did she have to drop?
I am on. I apologize, having some connection issues here, but I'm
no worries, Erin. I just thought you'd be good to speak to maybe some of the greatest efficiencies that from technology, including AI, that we're seeing today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we hear from clients is the biggest efficiency gains come where they can reduce or eliminate a lot of the just the more manual, repetitive tasks, where they can take that off the plates of their team and free up the time to focus on more of the strategic thinking, the more creative parts of the work. And I think that repeatedly is where clients are seeing the early wins from AI and technology.
Okay. There's one question here that says, per ISO 13485 requirements, tools and software needs tools and softwares need to be validated if used in processes. Given that AI is an evolving technology, how can this be addressed to ensure compliance? Maybe that's one for Ebam or Greg.
Ebam, want to take a crack?
That. Sure. It's no different from validating any current tools you use today. I mean, that validation has to take place in the context of what is acceptable today. We know this whole area is evolving, and as the rules of the game change, you'll need to revalidate accordingly. So to my mind, it's just another tool validate what we've always done.
Okay. Great. We are about 7 minutes over, so I really think that we owe it to our audience to let them get back to their days, their lunch, whatever. The survey that was in discussion today is available at medtechintelligence.com. You can go there, download the report for free. We will be following up with an email that will include the recording of this event as well as that link to the survey. I'd like to thank our panelists from Celligence and SGS. It's been a great discussion. I'd like to thank Celligence for being the sponsor of today's webinar. And I'd like to thank all the attendees who remained on and still remain on for a fairly long discussion, but I think it provided some really good insights. Thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.